taking a part and time to participate today in this interview. I'm Zvezdana. I'm a student at the University of Belgrade. I'm studying international relations at the Faculty of Political Science, and I've been part of oikos Belgrade for almost 3 years. And I'm really happy and excited to be here with you today. So our interview is about different competencies. And I will ask you to maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, Zvezdana, and it's very nice to be back with oikos-inspired programs, because without oikos, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I'm Dutch originally, was never very interested in anything related to studies when growing up. It was just about football, going out, friends, and by coincidence, or I studied something called international business and management in the University of Applied Sciences close by. International business because I was like international. I like traveling, I like languages, and business because I was also with business. You probably can get a job later. And the first 2 years was just doing what I had to pass. But then in the third year of my program, they actually forced me to go abroad. And I went to Paris for half a year for an internship, then went to Lyon for half a year. And I realized that this whole different world that functioned completely different from where I came from, started discovering things around sustainability and all of those things, and decided to stay abroad. So also did my fourth year abroad, and worked for a while in a company where I would say the better I was at my job, the more CO2 I cost. And after a year of doing that, so I was in parallel trading, I realized that this is really not something that's making me happy and there has to be more. And then decided to move to Switzerland, where I said I have to study something again and prepare myself for this crazy world that we have out there. Went to the University of St. Gallen, where I studied economics. And yeah, I'll tell you something more in my personal story about what actually happened there. But then after St. Gallen, I co-founded the Impact Hub here in Zurich, about the 10th Impact Hub in the world. That grew quite well. Out of the Impact Hub, I co-founded another spin-off called Stride, which is an unschool for entrepreneurial education, entrepreneurial leadership. Then became a father and decided to prioritize family life. So started to work 50% and 50% at home with the kids. First at ETH for 1.5 years, where I failed in mainstreaming sustainability in higher education, which is maybe a story for some other time. And currently I work 50% at Climate Gig, a so-called scaler in residence, helping to scale some of the entrepreneurial and educational programs at Climate Gig.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for presenting yourself and introducing a little bit of a background story. I know that you have a really inspiring story about different competences, so maybe you can share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we were asked in advance to think about a personal story or a professional story, and the personal story that immediately popped to mind is how I ended up becoming an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur and a change maker. And again, you heard it maybe from my introduction. Had you told my 18-year-old self that I would have such a role at some point, I would have laughed at you. People in my surroundings would have laughed a lot about that, because it was not in my nature. It was not something I set out to do. And it actually, for me, really was catalyzed when I went to the University of St. Gallen, and I think it was my second day, and I walked around the campus, and there was a big poster on the side with a pizza. And I was a student, low budget, hungry, and it said oikos and pizza. And I was like, and free pizza. That was really the slogan. I was like, okay, I like free pizza. And then I thought it has something to do with fair trade and Max Havelaar. I was like, okay, well, why not? If there's pizza, maybe an opportunity for me to meet some people. And I went there, and I immediately felt at ease. We were maybe 10 people, a small group. And I don't know, some of you might know this feeling. You come into a room, you talk to people, and you realize, hey, I found my tribe. I found my community. People who think similarly, have similar interests and values. And there was free pizza and even free beer. Don't tell anybody. I think they were not allowed to put it on the poster. Otherwise, probably more people would have come. But by now I say that actually oikos was the place where I probably learned more than during my regular courses at the university, because I became active quite quickly, organized the oikos conference, and then I decided to become president of the local oikos chapter. And this was right around the time of the financial crisis of 2008. And before that, oikos had been gotten quite small actually. So when I joined, we were maybe 10 to 15 people. And I really liked the challenge of trying to grow it. And the financial crisis helped because people were talking a lot more about sustainability, and we were able to start a lot of new programs. And I would say the reason that Oikos grew at that time, the topic helped, but also we focused on community. So we focused on relationships. We did a lot of social events. We helped people coming together. And and Oikos grew a lot, and I learned a lot. And then when I was in my final year of my presidency, I met the guy Michel Bachmann through Oikos, and he said, I have this idea for a project that I want to do. I want to bring the hub to Zurich. And I was like, okay, I like projects. I've done projects before. Michel's a nice guy. It has something to do with social entrepreneurship, which I found interesting. So I'll sign up to the project. But what he actually meant was he wanted to found a startup with four of us. And I had never considered a startup. I was studying economics to potentially go, to the World Bank or the IMF, or such a function was what I thought. And probably at that point, had he asked me, do you want to found a startup with me? I was like, no, I'm not an entrepreneur. I can't do that. But because he said, do you want to do a project around social entrepreneurship? I was like, yeah, sure. And we started getting going with four of us actually. And a few months later, when we were already becoming quite active, it dawned on me that this was more than a project when they told us, okay, you can sign this lease for this space where you can build the incubator for social entrepreneurship, but you have to bring 200,000 francs to the table. And we're like, whoa, okay, this is real. And we found creative ways around making that happen. And I was sucked into it, and I realized I really enjoyed it, building something, and I could use all of the skills and the competencies that I learned in Oikos around organizing, around creating teams, around project management, around stakeholder relationships, to help build the impact hub. And I think I grew, and with the team, the reason I think the impact of Zurich was fairly successful in the beginning, because we were a very strong team with four people, where the thing that united us was very much the vision. Of the change we wanted to set in the world, and the kind of working relationship we had with each other, was one around collegiality, around honesty, on trust. We were constantly giving each other feedback. There was a lot of self-awareness. So to name an example, like in the beginning when we were thinking about who should do what in the team, I said, yeah, I can do sales. I like presenting. I like standing in front of people. And to Michelle and Christoph, they looked at me and said like, no, Niels, you shouldn't do sales. And I was like, why not? I said, because you're too playful for a corporate. You're very good in bringing entrepreneurs in and in motivating people. Community building is what you can do, but you shouldn't do sales. And like, had you probably told me that before my Oikos time, when I became a lot more self-aware, self-reflective about my leadership practices and who I am, I would have taken this as an insult, right? Because you cannot do something. But they said it from a place of good intentions, of wanting to help, and I listened to them. I was like, actually, they were right. I was not the right person to do sales, but I could do a lot of other things, right? And I think this is just an example for how we grew as a team. And the impact that grew. We're 4 people, we're 10 people, and then we came at a big crossroads about what we wanted to do. But that will be the story of my professional story. So I don't know if you want to go there, Svedana, or if you want to ask a few questions around this first.
Maybe you can share a little bit about that. But also, I was wondering. It seemed like you were learning competencies that you weren't realizing that you're learning about them, that you're engaging them, and a lot about system thinking, also about self-awareness. Like, what was the time that you really realized that you learned them and you used them?
So I think during my Oikos days, particularly in the beginning, I would say I was high on adrenaline of doing something with other people I liked, work on something meaningful that related to my purpose. And we were just super busy, organizing events, conferences, talking to the university, etc. But I remember vividly that there was an Oikos President's Retreat, as it was called at the time. I don't even know if it still exists. That happened physically. So again, before COVID times, in the mountains, where we had a session early in the morning once with everybody, and it was facilitated by Claude Siegenthaler, who was back then an advisor for Oikos and Gallen, was very important in Oikos history. And we set up this session with 3 people where we started to give each other peer feedback and reflecting about what we were actually doing. And that was really my first instance of becoming aware of what I was doing, and the importance of taking time back with a few really clever people, yeah, and giving each other feedback and learning and asking questions. And again, in terms of personal practices, this is something that I can recommend to any students, that it's so important to find 3 or 4 people who you have the feeling are cleverer than you are. That's usually very good, or complementary to you. And every now and then, maybe once a month or so, once every second or third month, go to a bar, go to a restaurant, or have a breakfast meeting and sit down and reflect, where you can share your problems, questions where you're in, and people, yeah, give you feedback. And that's a phenomenal way of learning, and again, realizing the kind of capabilities we were doing and how we could use them better.
So can you share maybe a little bit how that way of acting helped you learn and prosper a little bit at what you're doing?
Well, I think it's the attitude I learned with which I'm going into a new situation. So when I'm going in there, I have the attitude of trying to learn and improve. So when I go somewhere and we discuss with the Impact Hub, shall we whatever open a new location or not, and we have a big and important meeting, people are going to come in there with different ideas and different opinions, and it sounds so trivial, right? But to really accept that the other opinion of people is not a blockage to what I want, but to accept that they sign up to the same vision as I do, the same values, they just have a different idea of how to get there, and to really practice deep listening. So to listen to their arguments, without having the feeling they want something else than I want, right? And I think that is something of that I learned to make a good distinction between the means and the end, right? If you want the same end, the same goal, you might have different ideas about the means of how to get there, but you can talk about that, right? As long as you want the same end, you have the same goal and the same vision, and that is something that is so important to clarify. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things. And then also my personal role, right? Reflecting about how I enter a situation, how I come across. Do I make enough space for other people? So, I mean, I'm an extroverted kind of person, right? So I speak more on average than others. But that extroverted skill is something I should use as a unique skill that I have, and I should not use to take up the space from the more introverted people who have equally valuable things to say, but just find it more difficult to express that, right? So the self-awareness about how you enter a situation without becoming insecure, I think is a really important skill, and makes for a very good team player, I would say.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us and sharing your story. Maybe can you share with us one key message that you would like to be from what you were talking?
Well, I think there are 2 or 3 things, but the first thing is that do not let the magnitude of a task stop you from trying it. So in my example, becoming an entrepreneur, wow, it sounded crazy. I think I would have never made it. But by taking very small steps at a time, I realized I could actually do it, right? And if you are uncertain about what you want to do after your student life, it is just really important to try out stuff, and not trying out stuff with, if whether it's becoming going the route of a diplomat or working in a corporate, not with the idea of I want to become a CEO or I want to become a chief diplomat at the UN, but just going in there and experience what is it like to start out in a profession and do your best and have trust in your own ability to grow and learn. Because probably by now, if I look back at how I was in 2010, there are loads of things that I would do differently now, but that doesn't mean that at that time, that place where I was doing something wrong. I was doing something to the best of my capabilities, and I had trust in my ability to learn and grow going forward. So just go and try stuff. Do not overcomplicate things in your mind. Yeah, and if you've been active with oikos for a while, I'm pretty confident you have the right skill sets to achieve something.
Thank you so much for that. And do you maybe have any other way of practicing this competency that you want to share, or you think that you already showed us the way?
Well, very concrete is maybe if you have a project team, whether it's building a startup or it's the board of an oikos chapter or some other thing that you're organizing, is you will have work meetings where you talk about stuff, you get things done, but then it's also important to take time for this personal learning, the shared learning. So during our retreats in the beginning of the hub, we always did a quarterly retreat. We went to the mountains for 3 days, and during the day we worked really hard, but then in the evening after dinner we sat down, and again, I hope nobody's listening, but we opened a bottle of whiskey, maybe another one, and we started to give each other feedback. So we took time, and we were really like, okay, Michelle, for you, what are the things I have the feeling you're really good at, and I appreciate about you? What are the things that I have the feeling you could become better in, or where you maybe have a different perception of yourself than people around you? I really wrote down like long lists, and then took time to give feedback, to ask clarification questions. And I think that practice of peer-to-peer feedback giving is really important, particularly if the basis you do it from is one of trust, and one of having the same vision, right, that I said before. I think that's a very concrete practice that I would recommend more people to do. And don't tell anybody that I said you have to drink whiskey with it, because you can do it without.
Good to know. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you once again for being able to participate in this program, and we really appreciate your contribution. And it was really nice to hear that from you, that story, and to start thinking in that way. It's really nice that I met you, and I hope that we will work together sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time, and good luck on the journey together. Take care. COVID greetings.
Thank you so much.